Good evening and welcome to The Buck Stops Here. In a week when 5 gay Indians went to the Supreme Court seeking protection of their fundamental right to personal safety and liberty under the Constitution, making the case that Section 377 violated them and were referred to the Chief Justice, India has decided once again to show the world it's not ready to accept and protect these very rights for all its citizens. This now by abstaining at the UN Human Rights Council on a vote to institutionalize an independent expert to work solely for the protection of the LGBT community globally from violence and discrimination based on their sexual preference. India says it had no choice given that the Supreme Court is hearing curative petitions asking that this colonial era retrograde section of the IPC be repealed. But could the government have separated decriminalizing homosexuality from the more fundamental need to protect citizens from crime and prejudice irrespective of their sexual preference and taken a stand? Well, to talk about India's stand and whether it could have been different, I'm being joined in the studio by former diplomat Meera Shankar. She served in Germany and the United States as ambassador as well. We have the spokesperson of the Delhi Catholic Archdiocese, Father Saravi Shankar, as well with us. From the BJP, we're hoping to be joined by Krishna Sagar Rao in Hyderabad and Salman Soos from the Congress, as well as from Mumbai, Apurva Asrani, writer and director, writer of Aligarh and an editor. He writes extensively on these issues. Meera Shankar, let me first open this with you because India has abstained at this. Sure. One can interpret an abstention in many ways, saying that they didn't want to obstruct the creation of this rapporteur's office, but it can also be seen as an unwillingness to take a clear stand.
I think India's position has improved a little from the last UN vote, which took place on this on the issue of giving allowances for gay spouses of UN diplomats when we had voted against. So, in that sense you could say it's an evolution in India's position. Partly it's dictated by the fact that your own domestic laws have not changed. So, I would say that the basic issue here would be how and when those laws are going to change.
Right, ma'am. In fact, the MEA has said that because there's a curative petition and several petitions before the Supreme Court on Section 377, that was the reason for the abstention. But the other argument is that the demand to repeal Section 377 is about the criminalization of a sexual act. Sure. This is about a rapporteur's office that has been set up to protect people from violent crime and discrimination because of their sexual identity. So, talking about a sexual act versus violence need not have been conflated.
It's not violence, it's also discrimination.
Yeah.
And I think these petitions deal with that aspect. In fact, if you recall, the Delhi High Court had struck down Section 377, saying that it was discriminatory against a particular group of individuals.
The state never took that up,
and that it therefore violated fundamental rights which are guaranteed, particularly the right to equality and equal treatment. So, clearly I would say that the laws in India need to change and move with the times. And
but the vote couldn't have been different irrespective of what's going on in the Supreme Court?
Slightly, I mean, it's a bit difficult because you have these laws on the one hand and the special representative or the special expert, independent expert as he's called, will really be looking into countries where there is discrimination, where there is harassment. So, I think at the moment perhaps abstention was the best that could be done, but the real focus has to be on changing those laws, because I think criminalizing sexual activity of any group on the basis of consenting adults in private, I think is something which is very last century.
Okay.
Yeah. And we would then be on the wrong side of history if we continue to have
I think we are currently on the wrong side of history on this. Krishna Sagar Rao, spokesperson of the BJP, you're joining us from Hyderabad. You've heard obviously the government's rationale for having abstained at the UN Human Rights Council to set up the office of this independent expert that's going to be looking into the protection of the rights of LGBT individuals from violence and discrimination. you know, the government has spoken, but as the party, what is your view on this abstention? Do you think that India could have taken a clear position on this vote?
Maya, first of all, I don't speak for the government, I speak for the party. And
right,
the
I'm asking you the party's view.
Certainly, yes. Yes, yes. The government, the MEA will make an announcement either today or tomorrow regarding the clear position of India on the LGBT issue. Having said that, India is not the only government which has abstained. Please understand that South Africa and Philippines and some other countries along with India also have abstained.
That doesn't make a difference to the question, sir.
No, Maya, please let me answer.
Yeah.
Because these countries also, and these are not third world countries, please, I want the country to know that some of the countries in the world haven't formulated exactly the stand on LGBT for a variety of reasons, and in specific to India, there are three major reasons. Number one being we are a multicultural population, we have a huge multicultural population, and we need to have a larger discussion and debate on the LGBT rights and what is our exact stand should be, and where do we stand. And we also have a heterogeneous population. When I talk about heterogeneous, you understand the spectrum. And the third is that we haven't experienced the kind of a cultural transformation like in West and you know, the other regions where they have been exposed to LGBT issues since 3 to 4 decades. And the knowledge and the awareness socially and culturally about LGBT issues and rights has happened only in the, I mean, actively happened only in about a decade's time. So I think India requires time. We are only seeking time. We are not being indifferent. We are not being disrespectful.
Okay, all right.
We are not being third world.
Understood your point. I'm going to bring Apurva Asrani into this as well. You're joining us from Mumbai. Apurva, you had written quite vocally when Orlando happened and the Prime Minister had condemned the killings in Orlando, but there was no reference by him to the fact that the victims were members of the LGBT community. Now that's something that was on everybody's mind in Geneva as they voted to bring in the office of the Special Rapporteur. India abstained. Now, one of the reasons, one of the arguments that have been given is because that there are cases pending before the Supreme Court. India was not able to take a clear stand. But an abstention itself is not a vote against. Do you agree with that? That this is some progress for India, that they didn't actually vote against it, but they abstained?
Well, I think, you know, this is, we're just passing the buck from one side to the other. You know. What the Supreme Court actually said, and we must understand this, what the Supreme Court actually said when in 2012, when Section 377, when homosexuality was recriminalized, was that it is a matter for Parliament to decide.
Right.
So they had passed the buck to Parliament. So if the Supreme Court, the highest court of India, has said it is in the hand of legislature, if it's in the hand of politicians, if it's in the hand of Parliament, then they haven't done anything about it in spite of the private members bill being introduced a couple of times, in spite of, you know. So today when they go to the United Nations, they say it's because it's pending in Supreme Court. When you've had the power to change it, it is in your hands. The reason it's going back to Supreme Court is because you're doing nothing about it. This is something that we have to take cognizance of.
I think that's a fair point. I think, Meena Shankar, before I come back to the others, I want you to comment on this, because there does seem to be, in a sense, a passing of the buck. Now, Krishna Sagar Rao is making the case that India wasn't the only country that abstained. There were other countries. It doesn't matter what other countries' positions are. We're looking at what our position is on a matter of personal liberty.
Of course. And certainly I would hope that the laws would change, because really it's a law of 1860 if you look at it, and you know, one high court has seen fit to say that it violates other fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution. Thereafter it has been set aside by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has, as the previous panelist said it's something for the Parliament to consider.
So in a sense, it's passing the buck. Everyone's passing the buck on to the other. So where does where does the MEA stand on this? This is
MEA, that, you know, it's not a law which MEA pilots.
Right.
This is something which is UN diplomacy which is a different aspect, but the fundamental aspect is to change the law, and that is something which is with the Home Ministry, and they pilot it. We are a conservative society, and nevertheless evolving in the direction of hopefully
Progress, some kind of
greater
liberty.
liberalism and individual choice
Right.
on matters of how we choose to live our life, with whom we choose to live our lives, and so on. So I would really hope that we do find a way to create a consensus to
Maya.
move forward on decriminalizing homosexuality.
I'm going to come back to you in a second. Father Sarvamuthu Shankar, I want you to come in on this, because we've heard the arguments about cultural sensitivities, about conservative societies, that the other countries that abstained are not third world countries. How is any of this relevant? I mean, the point is, when you talk about cultural sensitivity, the countries that have actually voted against this very clearly are all members of the Organization of Islamic Countries. They have talked about how religious sensitivities must be taken into consideration. They managed to push that amendment through.
Divine laws. Divine laws is what they say. Divine laws.
How is it okay for religion to stand in the way of people exercising their own personal choice?
No, the Catholic Church has been very clear. Right from beginning, anything that is discriminatory, we are against it.
So, would you have supported India voting in favor of this rapporteur's office at the UN?
Surely, because we need to go ahead, because it's not just a minority. It's a great number of people who are part of it. Therefore, when it comes to basic human rights, all of us are equal. When we say all of us are equal before the law, it means it has to be made equal. We cannot have some law which is discriminated and call everybody is equal before the law.
So then why are members of your community also opposing the repealing of section 377?
See, they are very small groups. It's not the official position of the Catholic Church in India. Therefore, it needs to be distinguished. Whereas we always say we are against any kind of discrimination, but then at the same time we cannot stop them from filing a petition, because it's also their freedom. But then it's up to us, it's both to the parliament and the court
All
to
right.
decide.
So I'm going to bring this back to our politicians. Salman Soz, I haven't come to you, so let me ask you. Everybody on this table, everybody on this discussion seems to be of the view that India needs to keep up with the times. We definitely need to look at repealing section 377. It's retrograde in the worst possible way any law can be in this country. We have, in a sense, squandered an opportunity to show our position to the world at this vote at the United Nations. But, politicians pass the buck. Apurva has made the point that Supreme Court passed the buck back to Parliament. Now it's hearing curative petitions. Individual members of Parliament have gotten up and spoken against 377. They've tried to introduce private members' bills. It's not so easy. Everyone can sit around this table and say we should change, but why is no one changing then?
Well, first of all, let me just say this very clearly, that as far as the LGBT community is, they should have the same rights as any other citizen in this country. And I think 377, and this is not just I, but the party, our Congress party, our leadership, we do not believe that 370, criminalizing, sexual orientation or personal behavior is the right way to go. I personally, not just personally, that our party feels that by abstaining at the UN vote today, there was, the idea was to defend those who are discriminated against, those who are constantly targeted.
They're victims
and
of hate
India
crime.
should have stood by the LGBT community without reservation. And abstaining is a very, I'm sorry to say, this is not a good way to go.
Yeah.
And by the way, the BJP keeps talking about this is a heterogeneous country, this is we're a diverse country. Of course, that is why we should be respecting everybody's rights.
All right.
And by the way, in 2015, Maya, let me just one final point. In 2015, when the UN Secretary General, wanted, a marriage equality for UN staff, India voted against that.
Okay.
India voted against that. Resolution was passed, but India voted against that.
Yes,
and that
absolutely.
time they made some other excuse.
That's the one that we were talking about just now.
The BJP is wrong. The BJP should join hands with the Congress Party, decriminalize,
Well, there are several members of the Congress Party as well who are not supportive of this position, Salman. I think we need to be
that
honest
may be
about.
so, but that may be so.
Yeah.
That may be so, but the leadership of the Congress Party and the Congress Party, we believe
Okay.
that all people in India, the LGBT community, they should have the same rights as everybody
All
else.
right.